And welcome back to the Mad Sopranos Men Show. We're your hosts, Chris Brodhead and Michael Dennis. We are the most autistic Mad Men show on the internet. We are the most autistic Sopranos show on the internet because we're analyzing both shows at once, one episode at a time. We're looking at broad themes, broader storytelling elements, and stuff we can learn as potential storytellers ourselves to make better products, to make more engaging stuff. So we're taking a look one episode at a time at these guys. Coming up this week, we have episode 6. So for The Sopranos, that's going to be Pax Soprana. And over on Mad Men, that's going to be Babylon. Chris, how did you celebrate the 25th anniversary of The Sopranos this week?
Well, I was informed of the 25th anniversary by your incredible photos at Tony's house that you had told me about, but I had actually never seen before. I didn't
Yeah,
realize the entire like living cast was there.
yeah, yeah. It was good. There wasn't like Christopher and Bobby weren't there, but Janice, Richie Aprile, a couple of the smaller guys, like the secondary tier guys. Furio was there. I
Yeah.
have a video. There's that infamous scene in season 3 where they rough up the um, doctor on the side of the golf course,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and when Furio knocks his hat off, he goes, "You got the B on your hat," and he smacks him in the head. I got a video somewhere of Furio doing that to me,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's really good. So maybe I should go through my stuff and try to find that.
Dude, I watched that episode last night. That's like I think the reason we like Sopranos is like Tony and all of his henchmen just do all the things that we wish we could do, but would be like get our asses kicked and get sent to prison if we
Yeah,
ever did any of that stuff.
yeah. Like I like how no one else in the doctor's foursome on the golf course like called the cops or did anything while fourth guy got beat up and just and knocked in the lake. I feel like they call the cops on us in 30 seconds. Like we wouldn't even make it out off the ninth hole,
Yeah, yeah. We
but
would be
they just
rightfully tased.
yeah, yeah. I so I've been watching the marathon all week because it started like last Thursday, I want to say, and they've just been doing a season a day. And when
Oh,
it first started off, I thought it was going to be like the Simpsons marathons that used to run on FX where they would just run it 24 hours a day. And that was great, but you missed like 3 great seasons by them running them overnight.
mm,
You know, like you go to bed and they just keep going and you wake up and season 5's done and season 6 is done and season 7's like halfway through. But they started each one of these at noon every day. So you could
mm.
go through like the whole season and through the whole season. And this is a great week. My buddy Wally lives in Cleveland. He told me he got COVID and his girlfriend was out of town and he had nothing to do all week except sit at home and watch The Sopranos with his woman gone. And I'm like, oh god damn it, how can I get some of that?
Dude, that's, in junior year, like, literally to the day that Metal Gear Solid 2 came out on PS2, my
Yeah.
lung collapsed, like, violently, and I had to go to the hospital, and I was in the hospital for a week, and, like, all the girls in my school were like, "Oh my god, poor Chris, let's go, like, say we're sorry for his pain," and all my buddies were like, "That fucking prick, he's just he's playing Metal Gear Solid 2 all day in the hospital."
I weep not for that man. I know exactly what he's up to.
And they were not wrong because that is in between them plugging me with, uh, I think it was essentially heroin, it's
Yeah.
called Demerol, but it's
Oh,
like the
yeah.
highest grade, painkiller. It's what, Michael Jackson was taking when he died. In between
That's a
them,
ringing
like
endorsement.
in between them plugging me with that, because you can't really do much.
No, you can't.
So, in
The
between Demerol sessions, I was crushing some Metal Gear.
doesn't that also make an appearance in the, Checkin' In, fake Broadway show in The Simpsons when they go to New York, where it's like, "No more pot or Damerol, no more sinking fun at
Not at
all."
all,
That's
checking
the only other place
out.
I've heard that. That's the only place I've heard that, phrase in a long time.
Yeah, yep, checks out.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the marathon. So I was watching chunks of it throughout the week, but then last night was the finale of it. The last, the last couple episodes. And I had it on as we're going through dinner and stuff with the girls and just going through our normal nightly routine. The series was winding down about like 7, 8, 9 o'clock. And I had it on a TV in an extra bedroom, and I kept walking in and checking on where we were, almost like it was a football game that I couldn't take my eyes off of, but I knew I had other stuff to do.
Yeah.
So we get finished with the finale, and I was telling Jenny last night, like, whenever I watch the final season, whenever I watch the finale, and especially like the final season, kind of all the way through, I I'm exhausted afterwards. Like I really it wears me out. I even get in a spot where I'm like, man, I don't know if I can watch Sopranos for another week or so. And I usually take like a week or two off because I'm just emotionally drained from it. And I feel
Yeah.
like I I feel like I lost my dad all over again when the series ends.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, it is like we are like thoroughly invested in these characters, and you've seen the show. You've probably seen Sopranos all the way through 10 times, right?
Oh, it's more than that.
More than
Because
that.
I just Yeah, because just like The Simpsons and just like, well, that's probably the only other one, but that's just the default show I put on in the background if I got nothing else to watch and I'm just trying to do some stuff,
You
and
think
that's
you
been the
watch
case now for
Sopranos
yeah,
more than Simpsons?
I think so, yeah, yeah.
Really?
And by that, I would say it's like 55-45 if you wanna do a percentage.
Mhm.
So, the amount of times I've watched this the amount of times I've watched every episode over the last 25 years, how many times is that? Is it 30 times an episode? Is it I've seen every episode at least once every single year.
Yeah. That's
So,
25. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I would say like Simpsons for me, I've seen every episode from season 3 to season 11 at least 20 to 30 times.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I feel like, those were such formative years that there's nothing I could watch no matter how many times now that would like just burn itself into my unconscious.
That's funny you mentioned that because I was thinking the other day, I was watching Dark Knight Rises,
Mhm.
and as much as I love that movie as many times as I've seen it, there were still a couple scenes I found myself not knowing what the next line of dialogue was,
Mm.
like the immediate next line, which is odd for me in my autism setting. And I thought about that too, and I was like, that came into my life at a time when my brain wasn't such a sponge
Yeah.
and didn't absorb every last ounce of it.
Yeah.
So where Simpsons did, where a lot of Sopranos did, that came too late in the game. Like there was too much was set in concrete up here for it to settle, if that makes sense.
Mhm. No, yeah, that makes exact sense. Your brain had, like, hardened all of its neural pathways. They weren't being, like, wildly tangentified by
Yeah.
hilarious, Simpsons episodes and violence and nudity from Sopranos.
Um, to give the audience a little bit of insight on the two of us too. One of my favorite things about Chris and I in our relationship, especially when we were living in Chicago together, was when we'd spend the days apart, like running errands and different stuff. And we came home at the end of the night that night. We'd often talk about scenarios where we were out during the day where a Simpsons quote was perfect. It was like, oh man, you should have been there for that quote. I was saying it in my head and it was perfect.
You would have fucking died, bro. Everyone else was gonna be
Yeah.
like, "I was an idiot."
Yeah, yeah. Nobody knew what I was talking about, but oh, you would have loved it.
I did it anyways, just so I could tell you about it.
Yeah, that was a recurring theme. But yeah, let's go ahead and hop in. These two episodes are very woman heavy. These are
Mm.
our woman heavy episodes. Over on Mad Men, we're following Joan and Roger. We have a lot of stuff with Betty and her insecurities and where she is, and we get a lot of Midge as well. And then over on The Sopranos, a lot of Tony and the Russian. We have a lot of scenes with Carmela. It's almost like, especially on Mad Men, we've gotten glimpses of the women's lives, but this is the first time we have an entire episode devoted to them. Oh my god, I totally forgot about Peggy's arc and her basket full of kisses.
And a dog playing the piano.
Yes, yes, like a dog playing the piano.
Yeah, I think that's a really good catch there. Perhaps that is part of the template. Is like, all right, episode 6 is where we gotta start establishing these female characters who play such an instrumental role in all of these,
Yeah,
alpha male characters that we're focused on.
because I feel like in some ways we've almost gotten more Melfi up to this point than we have Carmela,
Mhm.
and so to get more of them, and especially, I'm sitting here thinking about Tony's Gumar, the Russian, and I just want to talk on just what a pain in the ass Tony Soprano's life seems to be at times.
Well, I
And
dude, I don't understand, obviously, I haven't finished Sopranos, but I'm further along, and, I just watched the episode where, like, it was, like, the life of a stripper episode in season 3,
oh
and Tony's
yeah, yeah.
just, like, blatantly smashing some random stripper, prostitute, and I'm like, "Alright, you do that, but you have a Gumar, but you have a wife, like, why do you need a Gumar if you're, like, with some woman that he's just paying and then doesn't have to deal with her, like, up and down emotions."
I isn't the point of a Gumar to like be an escape from your everyday life, from your wife and from your kids? Like, isn't that supposed to be like it's supposed to be like almost like an eternal girlfriend? Where we go out
Mhm.
on Friday nights, I go over to her place, we can relax a little bit. I don't bring the rest of the world with me. If I start going to my Gumar's house and it's just as chaotic, and if not more so than my home life, what am I doing here? I feel like it would literally take. And if anything, like that scares me away from having a mistress because number one, I don't have the patience for it, and I feel like the second it ever hit the fan, I would just be like, what am I doing? This is awful. I don't like sex this much. I'm going home.
Yeah. No, that was confusing because I mean, we basically never see, like, good times between Tony and his Gumar, like, how did he ever think this was a good idea?
No, no, especially the Russian. I can make an argument that him and Gloria, especially in their early part of their relationship, they have a really good connection. And he even says, he's like, Gloria knows a lot of stuff about a lot of shit, arts and the movies. And it seems like they have, a genuine connection about some things before it goes off the rails and we find out she's Livia. But so that makes sense. Like that, I understand that. But the as Tony puts it, the Czechoslovakian refugee who has nothing but just chaos in her life. Where are you getting any joy out of this?
Yeah.
Over on the other side, at least Don and Midge, they seem to get along and enjoy each other's company.
Well, for Don, uh, it doesn't seem like Tony lives much of a double life. Like
No,
his life is very much the same across the board. Like he's sweet and gentle with like Meadow and to a lesser extent Carmela, but he is definitely who he is every waking moment of his life. Whereas Dawn has to be this incredibly precise, like specific person for fear that everything will explode if he's not. So
yeah,
his mistress makes sense. He's like, "Oh my god, I can let my hair down, I can be myself, I can, say what I really feel."
yeah, and Midge is also a bit more of a I don't want to say like a professional equal, but they're each
Yeah.
somewhat in the arts world. He can bounce ideas off of her that
Well,
I you
she's
know he
she's low class too, like, he feels superior to her, he's not threatened by her like he is with Betty.
yeah, and with Rachel Menken.
Yeah.
I think that's in there too. Speaking of Rachel, we talk about similarities in the episodes, and I have written down here, heavy emphasis on adulterous relationships. We have Tony and the Russian and Joan and
Roger.
Roger in this episode. But then also the other similarity for this episode is the Jews. And Hesh plays a big role, and we get more information about him and his cut
Yeah,
as Uncle Junior is expanding and making new rules. And then we have a lot with the Exodus book and recent Jewish history as of 1960,
yeah,
and Rachel Menken being a big part in this. So another little similarity there.
yeah, yeah. No, that's, I wonder if there's some deal that, because David Chase is, I don't know, is he half Jewish or part Jewish? He's mostly
I,
Italian, right?
I've only heard that he's Italian, but
Okay. I mean, there seems to be kinda running jokes in Sopranos about the similarities of Italians and Jewish
yeah,
people. It was a recent episode I watched. Tony was like, "It's like, Jewish people with better food."
yeah, yeah. That's a good line.
But I do wonder, um, because a lot of the great writers of our time, like, are Jewish, and it's like they're writing for shows that are not about, being Jewish, but there does seem to always be some aspect of Judaism,
Some
in the
element.
story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading, I got a book a few weeks ago, and it's a collection of articles and stuff about Mad Men specifically. And I was reading
Mhm.
one the other day, and I don't have the actual book on me. It's in my bag in the car right now. But it was talking about basically like the pacing of the shows and or the pacing of Mad Men and how it sets up story structure. And the gist of this article, it mentioned The Sopranos a couple times, but mainly about how the shows broke with like kind of the convention of the serial to where, each episode doesn't just flow neatly into the next one. You'll have some storylines that take a break there'll be entire episodes where they don't mention a particular storyline. You'll have episodes that are completely contained, that don't touch on larger storyline elements, but they're very important and they develop character. But the gist of this article, and it was written probably around like 2007, 2008, was about how both of these shows broke the rules and don't follow a set of rules. And as I'm reading this, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but as we're watching this right now, we're clearly seeing a set of rules that they both establish
Mhm.
in sort of storytelling elements. And you and I are picking up on major themes and major elements in each of these, beat by beat by beats, episode by episode. And I think at the time when the circle was written, yeah, you could be like, "Oh no, they're both playing by their own rules, and they both don't follow a script." And like, no, both of these shows really are. Like it's kind of shocking how much each episode that we've done so far, the holiday episodes excluded, but in season one, there's some major stuff that's mirrored in both, and I don't think that's a coincidence.
Mhm. Something weird popped into my head. So, you know, from my perspective, and I've heard this from some of my writing teachers as well. They said for all intents and purposes, Breaking Bad is just like a 70-hour movie.
Yeah,
Like the whole thing, if you're looking at it, on one sheet of paper, it follows the same kind of ebbs and flows as like a great film. It's like they just slowed it down, like, immensely.
yeah,
I remember, like, a couple years ago, my buddy, he's like a DJ and, like, a music wizard, and he was just, like, fucking around with the Jurassic Park score, like, the
yeah.
main theme song, and he had this program that could, like, slow down music, like, 1,000% or, like, 10,000%. And he did that for just the theme, so he made, like, a 90-minute version of, like, the 3-minute Jurassic Park song, and it, like, worked. It worked so fucking well.
Interesting.
Um, and it went super viral and, like, s Ebert, or Gene or yeah, the one that's still alive, like, retweeted it, and I listened to it, and I was like,
Yeah,
"This is so weird." It's like it's atmospheric, but, like, my subconscious, like, knows what it is, so I'm just excited for, like, 90 minutes instead of just 3. And I feel like
interesting.
to some extent, like, that's what they did. They just took they took an idea for a movie, and they just slowed it down 10,000%, and then we're taking these, like, super detailed tangents to just develop these characters, massively, incredibly well.
That's really interesting. I did not come across that. I might have to go find that.
Yeah, it's weird, like, how it affects you the same way even though it's slowed down 10,000%.
I wonder if you would have the same reaction, the same feeling if we took like another uh kind of famous score and did the same thing, but you didn't know, but you weren't told up front which one it was.
Mhm. I think you'll be like, "Oh, fuck, this is Schindler's List."
I was thinking more like Star Wars or Jaws.
Yeah,
To be
something
honest with
fun.
you, Chris, I haven't watched Schindler's List nearly as much as Star Wars or
Mm,
like Indiana Jones.
yeah,
Um,
I
but
I
that's just me.
figured.
I can't speak for the movie going audience.
Yeah, it's not quite as, light of a ride, not quite as
No,
enjoyable.
no, not at all.
And to comment on something you shared, how Mad Men and Sopranos, like, they won't, like, kinda, like, pick up on storylines, or they won't, like, finish up storylines, or they'll be, like, the middle cut out, like, end on one episode, and then a bunch of shit happens, and then we see it in the next episode. Um, that's fine when Mad Men and Sopranos do it, but when Dark Knight Rises does it, everyone decides that they're way too smart for this movie.
The fact that there's like some stuff takes like a 20-minute, there's a gap in direct plot stuff, like a 20-minute gap in the middle of Dark Knight. That makes it unwatchable. But
Mhm.
here's the thing. You know what? Here's the thing. If anybody we knew who had criticisms of The Dark Knight Rises actually used that as a criticism, then I would at least have I can at least have a conversation with them. They'd be like, "Well, there's this plot point that they develop that shows up in the first 20 minutes, and we don't get back to it for another hour and a half. I want to get back to that plot point." The only criticism you and I ever come across for Dark Knight Rises is just it's just not any good. Like, all right, I'm all ears. What's up?
Yeah.
What's the problem with it? Well,
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah, at
that just
least
seems to be the consensus that everyone jumps on, but it's in
yeah.
my opinion, it's, like, at least 80% as good as Dark Knight. It's a little
I
rough
often
around the edges.
I often compare it to Return of the Jedi in that it is,
Mhm.
it's the third in this in the trilogy. I will admit that it's not as good as number two. It does have its flaws, but the heights that it reaches are so incredibly fucking high that it's undeniable, and you can overlook its flaws. And I was sitting around a while back thinking about which one, which one's better, and I think Dark Knight Rises is better than Return of the Jedi,
Yeah.
and that's coming from somebody who grew up,
Well
as
well, he didn't replace Bane with a bunch of plush teddy bears.
exactly, yeah, yeah. At least it keeps its grittiness.
Yeah,
Um, I was sitting around one day. Maybe this will be another video for another time. But like, there's this one guy I follow on YouTube, and I forget his name right now. But he was doing the same. He's like, I'm gonna fix the Matrix sequels with by reshooting or redoing as little as possible, but just by kind of like rearranging and adding a few maybe additional scenes or something. And his version of the Matrix sequels, I thought were really good, and he addressed some issues and did an improvement. And I want to do a similar one with Return of the Jedi, where we're going to change the pacing, we're going to take out the Ewoks. There's like five changes you can make in there within that movie is just as good as Empire, but they fucked that up.
yeah, Han dies, maybe.
No, I don't want to do that. Here's why. Because I used to think that, but I like the last shot in the film where all of our heroes make it to the end. Call me sentimental, but I like that. I like that they stand triumphant, and
Yeah,
I like that all of my heroes in my children's space wizard movie are okay at the end and get to live happily ever after. So I
yeah,
wouldn't change
mhm. Yeah, and then, with all 3 of them alive and capable, we could have a good sequel trilogy.
yeah, one where we actually got all three of them on screen together for at least 1 second.
Dude, let's just get really good at this AI animation and
Yeah.
then just remake everything to our liking.
That's funny you mentioned that because I've been, outlining a, you wanna see this on my Instagram page? I've been outlining a Gaston film
Mm.
because all we watch is, Disney stuff with my 2 little girls, and outlining a script for a sequel to Beauty and the Beast that just focuses on Gaston.
Mm.
And we take him post the movie, and he's now like his own hero, and we have his own story. So I'm kind of with you there. But let's get back to our two major topics at hand. Something that I noticed an interesting little character nuggets that they dropped in here early on in Mad Men when Don and Betty are sitting in bed and they had just come from the movie, and Betty starts talking about Joan Crawford, the actress in the movie they
Mhm.
just saw, and how old she looked and how
Mhm.
awful she looked.
Mhm.
And she used to be, this lovely young beauty, but Betty says that she'd rather disappear before she starts to age and before she starts to look old. And she does. She
Mhm.
absolutely does. There's a complete fulfillment of that desire.
Dude,
As
how
you mentioned in our
fucking insane is that, that they had that, like, buried deep in a throwaway line in season 1, and then how many years later? 8 years later, that
yeah,
comes to fruition? How the fuck
yeah.
do you keep that in mind? Like, did Weiner write down the character arcs for every character before they start like, he just created, like, a Batman the Animated Series-esque show bible, and he's like, "Here's how everyone's gonna end."
Yeah, yeah, and we have to follow. Here's their arc, and here's how we have to follow it, and here's how we have to get there. Um, but something similar to that, going over onto the Sopranos in season one, and then also in little, just very little moments throughout the entire series, we're introduced to the idea that Meadow is an awful driver. She's not any good at it. She runs over stuff. She has
Mhm,
dents in her car. That
mhm,
we and then in the final scene, in the very final scene of that show, she she's a bad driver. She can't park her car. That's what prevents her from getting into Holston's. Because there's that whole build while they're sitting at the table where she's trying to get that car parked. And the argument can be made that, Tony is shot there at Holston's because Meadow isn't sitting there.
mm,
If Meadow parks her car and walks into Holston's, she's sitting there in the booth when the man in the members only jacket comes out firing and can't clip Meadow because families don't get touched, but you can be shot in front of your family. That can certainly happen, as we see with Phil Leotardo in the finale too. But she's not there, and it's all because she's a bad driver, and because, like you said, that little thing, that little character element, then ends up becoming something that defines them or ultimately seals their fate.
mm, yeah, I
On
love that.
go ahead. Related to that too, Christopher in season one, we haven't gotten to it yet.
Just the
When he starts talking about wanting to be a writer and everything, and his line of like, what a, what's wrong, Chrissy? Tell Uncle Paulie, and he's like, I don't know, does just the regular everydayness of life like bother you? Like I'm just not cut out for the regular everyday elements of life. And that's evident by his job, and it's also evident by, the heroin that he takes over and over again to escape the regularness of life.
mhm. Yeah, I have a philosophical theory that is in line with that. I think that, you know, w like, stories are just normal life with all the boring parts taken out. So when
Yeah.
you watch a story, you're like, "Ah, that was awesome. That was interesting, engaging, like, that really kept my attention." But when you live a life and you have to live through those boring parts, do your fucking laundry and, like, clean up your kid's shitty diaper, you know, you get lost and you forget all these, like, amazing things. So if someone just watched your life, just like the highlights of it, 90 minutes, they'd be like, "That was a fucking riot.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was a ride."
Or if you like on The Sopranos or Mad Men, where an entire season takes place over the course of a year. Like if someone
Mhm.
just took the big elements of your year
Yeah.
and the big the big struggle that you have that runs through and made that into 90 minutes.
Dude, like, the most inane, benign, like, boring, boring person's life, you take the highlights from a year, that's a good time.
Yeah.
Most
Yeah.
I'm sure there's exceptions. So
I'm sure
my
there's plenty of I'm sure there's plenty of NPCs that are the exception to this rule.
Yeah. So my theory is that every great story that we experience did actually happen somewhere in a multiverse, small, big, some sort of other dimension. And the person, the writer, just found a way to tap into it and
Yeah.
just wrote down the highlights.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? I had something a second ago. Um,
And that theory came to me when we watched that H.R. Geiger documentary, like, 10 years ago, and he's
yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about it, he's like, "I didn't come up with the xenomorph. I had these nightmares and visions where I went to this world, and I saw them, and I saw what they were doing, and it scared me to my core. They are what I saw in the abyss."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Fuck."
Tapping into the ether.
Mhm.
Uh,
Staring
that's
into
funny you
the
meant.
abyss, man. That's
Yeah.
what happens.
On a more related, like lighthearted but related topic, I remember hearing about or reading about when they wrote Animal House. What they did was, like, the guys who wrote Animal House, they took all of like their 10 best, wildest college stories that they were a part of or they knew, and they just pulled all of them and put them into one thing.
Oh.
And there may have been some exaggeration here and there, but getting back to your thing, like if you took all the highlights and put it into and concentrate it
Mhm.
into one digestible piece of content, then it becomes the most wild ride ever. But if you
Mhm.
lived that, you might almost forget what a wild ride you had because, like you said, you get bogged down by the regular everydayness of life.
Yeah, the regular everydayness is like 99% of your experience. Like, that's that's the that's the toll you pay to experience that 1% of, like, just exclamation ecstasy.
You
Like
have to pay the troll's toll to get into this boy's soul.
exactly.
Yeah. I liked in Mad Men today another little similarity. There was a line that Don gives about mourning is just extended self-pity.
Mm.
And that felt like a Melfi line to me. Because she
Mm.
said many times depression is rage turned inward. That those two sound very similar. And then you can go to Livia and what she says all the time about, oh, you go about in pity for yourself, which Tony adopts. I thought that was another interesting little line there that I felt could have been on either show.
Hmm. Yeah, it's, I feel like we're finding the aspects of Sopranos that were written by Matt Weiner,
Yeah.
because
Although I
there's
don't think Weiner was on the show at this point.
oh, he wasn't?
No, I don't. Let me pull this up and double check.
Or maybe they were just the biggest kinda overarching themes that he
Yeah.
absorbed while being on the show. Here, I got a
So,
question. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So Weiner doesn't join the staff until 2004
Mm.
in season 4.
Oh, wow, okay,
Yeah.
damn. I got a question for you.
Mhm.
So, I would argue that George Lucas was in the right place at the right time, and, it's kinda like, thank God for him for creating it, but if someone who understood the source material more had created it, I don't think we'd be in the mess that we're in, and I think he was a bit of right place, right time. What is your perspective on David Chase? Because some of the writers on Sopranos are some of the best TV writers of all time.
Yeah. I think no matter who you are and what your situation is, a lot of success is timing
Mhm.
and are you ready when the time comes? And are you able to fulfill your end of the bargain by, showing up and doing your work? So, yeah, I think everybody is owes a little bit of their success to the times, especially when creating content like this. Because I don't know if if Star Wars comes out in 1967, is it as big? It does, does is Sopranos even able to be made now, even if it never existed before? I don't know. I don't think so, and at least not in the form that it currently is.
Mhm,
So I think that's important. But I also think, you talk about having great writers and there to support him. How much of that also falls on David Chase for seeing the talent in these people and wanting himself surrounded by them
mhm, mhm.
and wanting their input?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, let's take a look at Star Wars for a continued example of this. I think Star Wars was at its best when Lucas had strong producers, and that's with the original and with Empire Strikes Back. He
Mhm,
fires Gary Kurtz and kind of cleans house and tries to do it all himself in Return of the Jedi. And the guy who directs Return of the Jedi is he's basically like a sitcom director. Like he's not the director of that movie. George Lucas is the director of that movie. Where the director of Empire, Irvin Kershner, he had directed a whole bunch of stuff before, these like really small, intimate films, and you feel that inside of Empire. Like, even though it is up against the backdrop of this entire galactic war, that movie's very focused on five people and what they're doing and how they're making it through this scenario. If David Chase, by that same kind of standard, at the start of season going into season 4, let's say he's just like, I don't want to hire Matt Weiner. Like he was telling me no too much, like Lucas was with his producer. If he
mhm.
doesn't bring in Weiner or he doesn't bring in these additional talents, does the show go off the rails and become, the Sopranos version of Return of the Jedi, which is uh
Knights
the Many
Saints
Saints of Newark?
Newark.
Yeah. Yeah. Once he's kind of got the whole he runs the whole show, it loses its teeth. It loses its edge.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
I
I
guess
think
that was the genesis of the question because when he had total control and he probably had a blank check to make that fucking movie too, it just didn't work.
no, no, it didn't at all. Are you talking about Many Saints of Newark or Return of the Jedi or any of the
Uh,
prequels?
all of the above.
Yeah, or yeah, you talked about timing and surrounding yourself with people who know the source material. Are you talking about every single piece of Star Wars Disney content?
That dude, that's a different conversation. That's just that's plain corporate greed there. Trying
Yeah,
and trying to, fit in with our PC culture.
yeah, you're trying to. Well, and once again, we're getting off topic here, but all the stuff I read about, the next Star Wars movies they're going to make, which by the way, they've announced like 10 films that have never gotten made.
That will
So I
never
don't
be
think
there.
anything. Yeah, I don't think any of them are ever going to get made. For
Yeah,
one,
yeah.
I, I well,
Kathleen Kennedy is like she's like the principal in Old School where, the he was just, like, making all these promises that he, like, couldn't keep. He's like, "Yeah, I do it all the time. It's called lie."
yeah, yeah. No, we're definitely going to work on this, and then she just forgets about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She's like, "Yeah, you'll get a trilogy for sure."
yeah, it just never follows through.
We were talking about how, both these episodes really, dive deep into the development of the female characters in these shows. And I think to an outsider's perspective, these are the two most misogynistic shows that have ever been made.
Yeah,
One's about a
which is
mob.
why we were surprised that they got such high rankings on the best TV show list we discussed a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't think you can show the struggle and triumph of women during the time periods of that these shows took place without showing the obstacles they were up against and just
Yeah,
the incredible misogyny that was going on. So when
yeah.
people are like, "Oh, those shows are so misogynistic," I'm like, "That's the fucking point. Like, what are you talking about?"
Yeah, and at no point does it, like, show our misogynistic characters, I don't know, succeeding because of their misogyny? Is anyone's life better because of it? We just spent 20 minutes talking about how much Tony's life sucks. No, it's
Exactly.
not like it's being glorified.
Yeah.
There's plenty of it's like these people live these misogynistic, hedonistic lifestyles, and there's never any consequences. The entire point of these shows are consequences.
Mhm. Yeah, they're like, "Hey, don't do this because this is what will happen."
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Um,
okay.
I thought you made a great point last week, and I even brought up to my wife talking about um nobody, you can everybody on Mad Men. Would you rather get fired on Mad Men and be thrown out of that world, or would you rather get whacked on The Sopranos? Because it's kind of the same thing in both ways. And you mentioned, Don's the only one that makes it back, and then I was thinking more about Pete, and Pete also makes it out in his own way. Like he tries to be Don. He tries to, live this freewheeling lifestyle and have a mistress and all this stuff. But that costs him his wife for like 3 seasons. And he just like lives alone and he's sad and pathetic. And eventually takes him, kind of getting over his family past and also understanding that the importance of his own wife and his family. That takes him to the very end.
Mhm.
And then he finally leaves New York, leaving his family name behind and leaving that lifestyle behind and moves to, I think, like Oklahoma City or something to go work for that airline company.
Yeah. I think it was Omaha.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
How could I
Yeah,
have gotten those 2 mixed up?
they're so different. And
Yeah,
that's, they're trying to do us a favor, us, like, up and coming breadwinners. They're trying to say like, "Hey, I know it's tempting to like do this. This looks like a lot of fun. Mistress, cheating your wife, infidelity, whatever. Like, oh, that's what like our dads and grandparents did. Like, oh, if you think that's just a normal thing, well, here's what's likely going to happen if you
yeah,
do that route, and here's what you lose, and here's how hard it will be to get back, and here's how badly you will want it back." And so, I
yeah,
mean, that's what so frustrates me with like our modern state of political correctness is that we can't even, you know, s- uh, have these experiences like through film because people are too offended by someone being misogynistic or whatever. It's like they're doing that for a reason. They're showing that there are consequences to that.
mhm,
But
yeah,
they're trying to save us the pain of having to learn that firsthand.
yeah. It would be like taking issue with like Christopher's story arc because it'd be like, well, I don't like how it shows his negative effects of heroin on his life. Do we have to show the negative effects of heroin? That makes me feel really uncomfortable. Can we just
Exactly.
remove can we just remove the heroin entirely or just show him having fun with heroin?
What
To
about
each their
all
own, to
the
each their own. Go ahead. Who are we to judge? Who are we to judge? If you want to slam heroin in a Walmart parking lot, who are we to judge?
yeah, and that's, say what you want about PC culture, but that's the real downside from my perspective is like, okay, well now everyone just has to learn these lessons firsthand, and it's gonna make our society much less like working well together.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
gonna
that's a really
cause
good
more
point.
pain. It's like, get
Yeah,
the
there's you're not allowed to create a cautionary tale
Nope.
because
That
someone might feel bad. Oh, speaking of feeling bad, I have a note here about Mad Men. About I love the scene where they go to the open mic, and my note here is just open mics have always sucked. But in all the ones you and I went to, I don't remember any chick taking their top off. So at least Don had that going for him at that one.
Yeah, I went
But
it wasn't an open mic, but I went to, a comedy show with an all-female troupe, and they
yeah,
were they were joking about they're like, "Well, no comedy show with all-female troupe can end without a bunch of nudity," and then they came like, the girl came out in, like, a fake naked suit, and I was like, "Oh, that's
uh,
pretty funny," and then the rest of them were, like, just buck naked, and I was like, "Now this is art."
now this is art I can get behind.
It
Yeah,
was like post-irony, modern postmodern. I was like, "This is genius."
Postmodern irony, post society cans.
It's like we came full circle to just like, "Nah, this is just fun. Let's just do this."
Yeah, 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 we went full circle. We went from no, we can't just take our top off for no reason to we're no, we're coming all the way back around
Yeah,
to it.
yeah. It's so ironic to lose its sense of irony to just be fun. Like, it was just
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. We're back to fun again.
Yeah, yeah. It was
That's interesting.
beautiful.
I have a note here about Betty and Tony's uh, Gumar each have a little monologue about what they do and how they feel when their man isn't around.
Mhm.
And Betty is lost, but she's sad and wistful, and she loves Don and follows him. And then Irina is just a giant mess and just angry. And then what a they each have their own little monologue, but man, they're on complete opposite ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, it is so, like, confusing to me to watch, Tony like, he obviously chose Carmela because she's a woman you would choose to have kids with. She's, like, responsible and, like, directed and, like, strong. And then, he's choosing his Gumar, and she's a fucking mess. She's like who you choose when you're, like, 20. She's
Yeah,
no fucking Becky.
I couldn't I could have spent like a month and a half with that woman when I was like 22 and had a ton of testosterone and all the time in the world.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
even then I would have been like after like a month, I'm like, all right, I gotta change my phone number. I don't
It's
ever
like
want this person calling me again.
yeah, is she supposed to show us that Tony doesn't he doesn't really learn from his mistakes?
Well, Melfi says, I think it's at the very end of season 3. No, it's in 4. It's in 4 right before the divorce. Melfi says, you made one good decision in your life vis-a-vis women.
Mm,
And back to your point, like, yeah, she's an actual mother and she's caring and this and that. And that was his one good choice. That was the one he had. And
yeah,
he never made another one ever again.
yeah,
And he's lucky he found her because if he does, what does Tony's life look like if he doesn't find Carmela
yeah.
and he doesn't have any home life to go back to? Is he meaner? Does he become like a drug addict? Is he like Paulie where just that's his life? Like all he has is the life and his rep?
Mhm. Yeah, probably.
Because I think if Don doesn't meet Betty, his life isn't that much different.
Mhm.
Don Don just keeps donning. I but let's take a look at the finale. Don goes and makes the best ad ever, returns to being an ad man, and Betty's dead. Don just kept being Don throughout the 70s, even with Betty 6 feet under. Like that just kept going.
Yeah, yeah. So did Don have kids because he wanted to have kids, or was that part of the act? Did he get married and have kids, really?
Ooh, that's a good question because there's that one scene. I want to say it's in like season 4 or something where Don's talking about children and having kids, and he doesn't. You're supposed to feel all these things for him, but deep down he doesn't.
Mhm.
So was that him? Did he do it for the act, but also because he thought that's what he wanted, and that's what he thought that's what he wanted. That's what was expected of him at the time. Also, would it have been beneficial for him and his job to have Betty by his side and be a family man? That's another possibility too, where he takes Betty to these events and he's got her and he's got this image. But if Tony doesn't have Carmela, he can just keep being a mobster. Like that he doesn't have to host a dinner party at any
Mhm.
point. That he can just live Paulie's life. He can live to a lesser extent like Richie April's life and just be in the mob. I think Christopher is the same thing. Like Christopher gets remarried. Christopher has a kid, and he admits it to Juliana Margulies' character about how that's what he thought he wanted. He even tries to pretend to be Tony. He gets married all of a sudden. We're gonna have this kid. Let's go buy a big house. He's gonna put on the mask. He's gonna be this role because now he's like clean and sober, and he's gonna go be this. But then it's not long before he's just right back in a car slamming heroin with some stranger.
Yeah.
I think both of these shows do a good job at kind of getting to the root of. I think the message of both show could be either show could be people don't change in spite of all their efforts to try to. But, as Tony put it, maybe you're born to this shit, and that's the die's been cast, and there's only so
Yeah.
much framework they can do inside of that.
Yeah. Dude, I'll share something maybe a little too personal for this platform. Um, I've been on and off with therapy for 30 years, 20 years, something like that. And I read a lot of books and I do a lot of, different types of therapy to try and change, to try and improve myself, to try and heal the traumas that, haunt my day-to-day existence. And, did ketamine, I did hypnotherapy, did business therapy, did traditional therapy, did couples therapy, whatever. They
Business hugs
all
therapy.
exactly. They all help to some extent, but it really wasn't until I did, ayahuasca that any change actually any, like, pronounced, like, noticeable, feelable change occurred. And it's like, I see other folks going through life, like my family and close friends, and I'm like, 99% of people are just they're gonna end up right where they started. Like,
Yeah,
nothing's really gonna change. Like, it is so hard to change, to heal anything, to alter your course,
mhm,
one iota. And it's
yeah,
like, you know, somehow taking this incredibly high-powered hallucinogen, and after taking it, I'm like, "Was that even a hallucinogen? What the fuck was that?"
yeah,
I don't know why it worked, and I don't know how it worked. I just know that, like, I feel significantly better and different
yeah, yeah.
months later.
No, that was great, man. That was beautiful. I'm glad you shared that. My
Yeah.
my similar experience with that is it didn't take until Nova was born for me to really rethink a lot of things and kind of change my frame of reference and also kind of decide what I want to be and what I want to do moving forward and what do I put my energy to and address, things in myself that I feel lacking. And it wasn't like she was born and then I came to this conclusion like, "Oh, it was this giant epiphany." For me it was she didn't sleep for like a year and a half and had some health issues early on. So I came to this conclusion because I sat in this dark bedroom with her for 18 straight months trying to get her to go to sleep. And it was just sitting there every day thinking like, what do I want to do when I finally get out of here? Like how much time do I have to dedicate to X, Y, and Z? And what do I want that to look like?
Mhm.
And that's what stuck with me is I think I took too much for granted and I took too much of my, future and time for granted. And it wasn't until I had that taken away from me. I'm just sitting in this room and I have to be here and I want to be here, but I know I won't be here forever. And once I finally get out of here, what what do I want to do then? And that was the big epiphany for me. And that's where mine came from.
Mhm. Hmm.
So,
Great, man.
it's on the side note, people talk a lot. You hear a lot of people say like, when I had my kid, that's when I stopped drinking. That's when I really pulled it together and this and that. And I have a similar thing about that. Like I really pulled back on my substances when I had kids, but not because of some weird epiphany. It's because I got tired of being woken up mid drunkenness at 2 o'clock in the morning to have to go do work during the worst part of your hangover. Like I now have to get up and I have an hour and a half worth of stuff to do. And I'm just like
Oh,
sitting there
wow.
sweating and just as physically uncomfortable as humanly possible. That's what
Yeah.
got me to kick it. It wasn't, oh, I want to be there so I can be more in tune for my kids. No, this is miserable. It's getting beaten out of me.
Yeah, that'll turn you sober real quick.
Yeah.
Getting woken up, you're like, "Fuck, I have to actually do something."
Yeah, yeah. Think about getting drunk and it's like 11:30 at night, and normally you're gonna sleep till 7, 8, sleep that off. You'll sleep through the worst of it. Nope, it's 1:30. You're getting up, and you got shit to do for an hour and a half. Oh my god, it's a living nightmare.
Yeah.
So that that's my own version of scared straight. Did you have anything else for these episodes? That about does it for me.
I think my final, note was I just wrote lousy beatniks.
Open mics always sucked, and beatniks have always been lousy. Two more eternal truths. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
I did like Don's dig at the guy where he's like, "I bet you spent more time on your hair this morning than she did." I really like that. That was a that was a haymaker Don landed there.
Yeah.
But very cool, man. I think we're really starting to get into some stuff here, and really noticing some big trends on these shows, and some, maybe it's not even the shows themselves. It's just it's the arc of storytelling done right. I don't know, but I think we're coming across so many similarities that it's impossible to ignore them and or to chalk them up as coincidence.
Yeah. And I think, right now with, AI becoming more and more powerful and prevalent, the show is allowing us to do the last thing that AI cannot do currently, probably until, like, next week, is, uh, express how a piece of art made us feel.
Yeah, yeah.
AI, this moment right now cannot. So
Well, what we're gonna do is we'll run this video through AI, and then it'll put out a script about how to appreciate art and to notice
how
patterns.
how to feel in
Yeah,
reaction to
how
art.
yeah, how to feel. As I texted you earlier this week, I'm gonna write an AI to that shows empathy for me and all the other emotionless autists out here.
That will be a very valuable tool.
Yep. All
Yeah,
right. Awesome. Does that do it for us?
and I think that'll do it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with episode 7. So for my partner Chris Brodhead, I'm Michael Dennis. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, give us a like and a subscribe. Look at it as like your charity for the day. Show us a little bit of support. That'd be greatly appreciated. But until
Yeah,
next time.
do it. Stand with our autism. Be in
Yes, yes.
solidarity. Autism
Yes.
solidarity. Subscribe.
All right. Thanks so much.
See ya.